Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm here with Peter Olson-Skog, who is the Superintendent of School District 197. Hi, Peter.
Good morning, Adam. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Peter and I did this at the Minnesota School Board Association, and we also wanted to record this so anyone can see it. So we're going to jump into our webinar today on how to jumpstart your recruiting process. All right. We already gave a little bit of introductions, but Peter, did you want to introduce yourself any more than what I did?
8 years of as a superintendent here in School District 197, going through the same staffing issues that I'm sure most people watching this video are. And along the way, heard this other district who had this frustrated parent who just couldn't get their kid into school age care and did something miraculous, which was to say, you know what, I'm going to come up with a solution to this, and then started working with that district. And that's how I heard about Adam and the great work that he had done with some of my colleagues here in the metro area of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and thought that I'd reach out, and glad that I did.
Thank you so much, Peter. You basically gave my introduction. I was that angry parent whose son was put on a wait list for after school care. That was in 2022. And since then, founded a company called Radar, and we've been working with over 25 school districts in the Twin Cities and greater Minnesota to help with recruiting and retention best practices. And today we're going to give a little primer on recruiting and retention best practices. All right. So, Peter, do you want to give us like the lay of the land? What was happening kind of pre 2022?
Sure. I mean, some of this was you could attribute to COVID. Some of this you could attribute to just the general labor shortage out there with more people retiring than coming into the job force. But for whatever it is, we all of a sudden were in this position that we had never been in, which was really long wait lists for our school age care. And families who were struggling, families who were coming to the school board and complaining about it for understandable reasons. If they can't get care, then they have a hard time doing their work. And so we had our person on my team that oversees that particular program had started diving in and doing a bunch of research and tried a whole bunch of different things. But, this is not an area of expertise for us. Recruiting and retention is not necessarily something that we had a ton of background in other than the typical things that had worked in the past. And we weren't in the past anymore and needed to change it up. So, yep, number two there. You can see the low applicant it was new for us, but we had a low volume of applicants. Our community was concerned, and we needed to do something different than we had in the past, but we weren't quite sure what.
Got it. And so that brings us to questions. Why were there a low number of applicants? And then also, why did so many applicants fall off during the hiring process? And so that brings us into some of the things we found. The first thing is how most people look for jobs these days. They're not looking in the classified section of the newspaper, and they're probably not going directly to your school district website. They're going to a job board. And job boards are for-profit companies. Job boards also look for friction-free ways that candidates can apply to as many jobs as possible, and 80% of candidates are utilizing their mobile device for their job search at some point in their job search. Another thing is that job boards are for-profit companies, okay? They exist because they make money, and so if you are not paying the money, you're unlikely to gain visibility. So if you're watching this, please pause, and I'd like you to go on to one of the major job board sites, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. You can even search on Google and search for your hardest to fill job and see if you are able to find it and how long it took you to find it, and put yourself in the position of a candidate. And when you're done with that, you can come back and watch. Okay, we're back, and this is just an example of Indeed, which is for any type of non-licensed staff in your school district. This Indeed is going to be your largest job board. I just searched for childcare staff in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the first result was this New Horizon Academy. They're paying $19 to $23 an hour, and they're actually located in Anoka, Minnesota, so outside of Minneapolis. And the 13th result is our Minneapolis Public Schools childcare worker. they're paying a lot more. They're paying 24.87 to 28.16, but they're the 13th result. Why is that? It's because they're not paying for placement. And so a lot of candidates aren't making it to the 13th result. They're not making it through to the second page. And so New Horizon Academy is going to get those candidates. So the next thing we're going to talk about is job descriptions. And this is somewhat unique in school districts. And Peter, you might have a perspective on this, but a lot of times you feel like you have to put all of the language of everything someone might ever do in that job in the job description. Is that your experience, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, well, educators like words, apparently, a lot of them. And I think that when it comes to job postings, that stems from a lot of things. One, we wanna put that whole job out there. Two, we wanna make sure there's sometimes some union discussions about, did you put all of the union language that needs to be there? And I think what we wrestled with effectively with Radar was to say, "All right, this isn't the only documentation people are gonna see. This is just to get them in the door." And so meet your other needs in one of these subsequent steps of the hiring process to make sure that they get all of the information that they need for the job. That was number one. Number two, I think in terms of a reason why we use so many words is we hadn't reflected on the fact that we're in a different job market now. And in the job market that we were in, we used a lot of words to honestly avoid having lots of applicants, right? We didn't want 300 applicants. We wanted to get the most highest qualified. We wanted to filter and weed people out so that only the people that were meeting this really high standard that we were setting would apply. And that's not our labor reality right now. And so we needed to change our approach from one of weeding people out to welcoming people in, at least to have more of a conversation with us about what the job would be and see if it would be a match. Obviously, we keep our expectations high. We want the best type of match between us and the skills for the job, but that doesn't have to be the first thing that they see on the first thing that they click.
And I love what you said there is almost a changing paradigm of inviting people in rather than screening them out. So you've been a superintendent for 8 years. When you started, would you see too many applicants for certain jobs that now you're not getting any applicants for?
Well, definitely over the course of my career, but yeah, I would say as recently as just before the pandemic, we were getting more applicants than we needed. I think the pandemic caused a lot of people to reassess their priorities, and at the same time, we were seeing this huge change in terms of, like I said earlier, more people retiring than entering the job force, and you put those 2 things together, and yeah, we have gone from too many to too few, and
Got it. Yeah. And we did a study. So minnesotasschooljobs.org is the statewide job board that all licensed teaching positions need to go to. The average word count for those positions are 411. Our suggestion is to keep your word count under 250 words for a job description. So, as Peter said, the job description is not the job offer, but the job description is an invitation in. What am I going to be doing? Where am I going to work? When am I going to work? And how much am I going to get paid? And what should I do for the next steps? That's what a job description should be. Again, most candidates are going to be looking at these on their phone. They should not have to scroll too much on that phone. They should say, "Oh, that looks cool. Let me apply." So here's an example of a real job description from a school district. This is 1,091 words. This is for an after school care staff. This isn't your district, Peter, so don't worry. We're not calling you guys out.
no, sure. Yeah, you could look very familiar to what we looked like before the change, so, yeah, this is
But you'll see that they use a lot of industry jargon, overly complex, and it scares people away, quite honestly. So this is just a revised one. So school cafeteria worker, what am I going to get paid? Where am I going to get work? When am I going to work? And what do I need to be? 18 years or older, I have to lift 50 pounds, and I should have some experience in food preparation. So there's 189 words. All right. So the next Once that takes us to the job description, we go into the process of the candidate applying. And so I always ask administrators to start with the candidate experience and work backwards. And Peter, your district and many other districts are using a system called AppleTrack. Can you give a little background as to what that system is and how it's used in school districts?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's a global system that the school districts use to communicate back and forth with their candidates, but the problem is it's a lot of clicks. And so I think we really needed to look through. I was surprised as Adam walked me through some of these different steps, all the different ways that somebody can lose interest in our system before actually getting in contact with us. And so that's what we needed to improve was making it really quick from you clicking to somebody from us getting a hold of you and it not taking you too long, because if you get 2 or 3 clicks in and you're lost and you don't know where you're going or you couldn't find in the first place, then you've already lost the game and they've picked the other job that was easier to find and somebody got a hold of them earlier. Because in many of these jobs, education isn't even on their mind. Like we're trying to recruit all sorts of different people into these jobs that they're going to Indeed. There may be jobs in all sorts of sectors that they're looking at. So how do you make yours pop to the top, and how do you hook that person into your organization before somebody snatches them up from underneath you? Because obviously where education is experiencing a labor shortage, everybody is experiencing a labor shortage, and you're competing with everybody for these jobs. And the quickest one to get a hold of the person often wins. And we were not quick. We were slow. If we even knew that they got into the system in the first place, because they would give up 2 or 3 clicks into this process in AppleTrack.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Peter. I came from a background at Amazon, and our goal was to have someone apply within 30 seconds and have them working within a week. So compare that with school districts. We're definitely not going to have them working within a week, but you could have them apply within 30 seconds. That is within your control. So we're going to do another activity, which pause this video and use your mobile phone and apply to your hardest to fill role. Time how long it takes you and try and see if you feel any frustration with this process. And when you're done with that, you can come right back. Okay, we're back here. So depending on how that process felt, you might have said, "Oh, that was pretty easy. I'm good with this." Or you might have said, "Oh gosh, we got to change something." So here are a few just general frameworks for when you're looking at a way for candidates to apply. The first one is do not require a desktop computer. Again, 80% of candidates are using their mobile phone, and Appletrack and PowerSchool and many of these other large companies, their software was created in the early 2000s. That's before smartphones were a thing. And so they're very difficult, if not impossible, to complete on the mobile phone. So at Radar, we actually bring candidates into our co working space to help them complete an application, which just seems really counterproductive, but that's what we do. The second thing is do not require a login. Logins are unnecessary at this point. We can match based on email, we can match based on phone number, and it's a point of friction that doesn't add much value. The other thing is to add, we call it a progressive application. So a lot of old school applications that they ask for everything all up front, all of your job history, which is also on a candidate's resume, all of the questions. AppleTrack usually has a 20 plus step application process before you can even submit. And we encourage school districts to ask progressively. So you might have your request for information. And then if you need more information, you ask it after you talk to the candidate. Or if you need to do a skills based assessment, you can do that at a point further along in the application process than in the beginning. And then the fourth thing is just try and get candidates to talk to you as quickly as possible. Do not put this barrier in between you and the candidate. And as Peter said, and historically, you might have had to do that because you had too many applicants, but you're probably watching this webinar because that's not the case. The next thing to look at is what happens after your application process. So, on a continuum, is it impersonal versus personal? Is it a phone call and a text message, or is it form emails? Whenever possible, be as personal as you can, because that's going to win out. Is it transparent or opaque? Do you let candidates know what is required in order to move forward in this job? And is it quick or is it drawn out? All of these things are going to help determine whether you can get success in recruiting. So, anything to add there, Peter?
No, other than like, I really like your term of friction. I think it illustrates the point pretty quickly. Like, people will self opt out of your application process at multiple stages through the game. And from their very first click, where they, oh, shoot, I forgot my login, right? Don't require a
Mhm.
login. Right? I can't see the screen because it doesn't work on my, like, and then, and Adam talked about those. But then the next point that we've learned that they opt out is took too long for you to give them a call and they already took another job, or the first call you had with them or the first thing you sent them was impersonal. Like, all of these things are losing you applicants, and they were losing us applicants. And we obviously in this market, we can't afford that.
Right. And then looking at the onboarding, we work with a lot of school districts now, and there are some necessary steps you need to take to ensure that folks are okay to work with a vulnerable population. And that's totally understandable. But for example, do you require a candidate to pay for their background check? We have a lot of districts who do require a candidate to pay for their background check. It's $25. That surprised me when I started working with school districts. So, what is that experience? How does that feel like? Because in the private sector, they're not paying for their background checks. If a candidate is working in some forms of school age care, they might need two different background checks. They might need one through the school district and one through the state of Minnesota or the state they're working in. That's a huge challenge. And guess what? That email from the state always goes to spam. And then they have 2 weeks to get their fingerprint where they have to drive to get it. So these are things that you should really map out the onboarding process. By no means are we suggesting that any of these steps are unnecessary, but transparency and communication are going to help that candidate get through these steps. And so here's just a little snapshot of what we were able to do with School District 197. We worked with their school age care programs. That's the after school program. With the job boards, we got 102,000 impressions. That's a number of people who are looking at the job. We did 442 phone screenings. So that's the radar team who was screening those candidates, making sure they had the basic qualifications and doing a light behavioral based screening. We sent 88 people to final interviews with the school district. As of this recording, there was 18 hires with 49 active candidates in the pipeline, and that led to 74 students removed from the wait list. So that's 74 families who have the care that they need right now. And everything we talked about today can be done with or without radar. So you don't need radar to do a friction-free application process. There's Google Sheets. You don't need radar to get on the phone. You might have the bandwidth to do that. So we're really here to share that recruiting is solvable. You don't need to do anything fancy except just talk to people. And that's really our goal here. So, Peter, anything else from you?
Well, I just appreciate Adam. When I agreed to do this and some other presentations with him, one of the things I wanted for superintendents and other people in the field out there was like, what are some things that you can do without hiring radar talent to do anything? And basically, are you willing to spill a bunch of secrets? Not that they're state security or anything, but secrets to people in my position that they could do without spending a dime on additional people. Now, we made the choice to spend some money with Radar Talent because of our bandwidth to do some of these things that are in this last step here of doing all of those phone screenings and some interviews, and they have helped. But many of the things that we discussed, all of the things that we discussed prior to this slide, and including this slide, if you got the bandwidth, can be done on your own. So I appreciate the disposition to wanting to solve this problem for us as people in the education space out of goodwill for the community. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our webinar today, and we look forward to having you back for more trainings and more webinars. But Peter, thank you so much for joining us. It's been quite a pleasure.
Thank you.